Next up is Tammy Thorp. Tammy, I met her a couple years ago. She was Director of Public Affairs at CIA. Tammy will discuss risk-taking.
Might have to go even lower, John. Thanks, John. So today I wanted to talk about taking risk, and that's about believing in yourself, being willing to take risks, calculated risks, and they open opportunities, and then they can also lead to setbacks and how you deal with them. But, when I first heard the prompt, when things don't go as planned, I thought, well, my background is I was a journalist and then I was a public affairs officer, so that could be sort of the motto of my whole life. But there were so many ways that we could go with this. One is, soon after getting to CIA 4 years ago as the Director of Public Affairs, we in Public Affairs did an interview about our social media. We had a lot of creative posts, some good content, and but we were doing a story. Cooperating with a journalist who was doing a story about us. So we were speaking about ourselves. I know better than that. That just never goes well for public affairs officers. We're not the story. And, but I was new, this had been in train before, and I didn't take the risk to rock the boat and say, guys, I don't think this is a good idea. Most of what was provided in that interview was great, and it made us all look terrific. But the takeaway that the journalist had, which essentially led everything, was CIA might post to TikTok someday, which is really not what was meant. And that led to a letter from then Senator Marco Rubio to my boss, own goal. And then another one I thought about was, there's the time that my boss, who was super busy all the time, and his time was extremely important. So when I got time on his calendar for an interview, you would expect that the recorder would record. I was in there, and I apparently didn't hit record. And so the director had to do the interview again. That lesson was be prepared and know how to hit record. But, all of this kind of led me to the larger picture of taking risks and the value of taking risks. A friend of mine said, what would you tell your younger self about taking risks? Like many, and this came up earlier, I have suffered from imposter syndrome at points in my career. And so about 25 years ago, I definitely was suffering from it when I had been a journalist covering the Pentagon for a long time. I was a producer. I was not on air. I was not used to having a byline or anybody knowing who I was, except in the Pentagon. But what I failed to take advantage of was a friend of mine was the NPR correspondent at the Pentagon, and she was moving on, and she wanted to recommend me to take her position. And I freaked out, and I did not take the risk of applying for that job. And it's something, we shouldn't regret things, right? Well, that's something that I regretted for a long time, but then it became an opportunity for me to learn from and to learn how to take risks. So I took a risk at another career inflection point. I had been very lucky. I had done all the jobs that I had wanted to do at my organization as a journalist. So I left a really secure job to go join CIA. I had gotten a conditional offer of employment. For those of you many of you in this room have been through this, and that means you don't really have the job yet. It's a very long, or can be a long and cumbersome security investigation, background investigation process. So my background investigation was taking forever. I had left my job at NBC, where I was covering the White House, very comfortable, et cetera, and I was waiting for this to come through, and I had taken other positions, et cetera. So I had taken this risk, and it really wasn't paying off, and I needed to get a job. And I was very lucky. I wound up at the Office of Naval Intelligence, doing maritime counterterrorism analysis, and I sold myself to the Office of Naval Intelligence as, listen, I'm a journalist. We do the same thing. I do the same thing as an analyst: gather information, synthesize it, present it to an audience. It's just a different audience, and they took a risk on me, and everything has come from that ever since, and it worked out. I made my way over to the National Counterterrorism Center, and I was presented with a number of other opportunities there, including a risk, and that was to become the director's speechwriter. People thought, because I'd been a journalist, that I knew how to write, and I didn't remind them that I was a television journalist and I was a producer, so I wasn't very good. But it did open other doors for me, and I ultimately became the chief of public affairs at the National Counterterrorism Center, and the Boston Marathon bombing happened on my very first day. I was so scared of saying something that I shouldn't that I forgot everything I already knew, and that was I had this incredible opportunity to be able to inform the media what was going on and help give them context so they could interpret all the world events and specifically the domestic events that were happening. And I was so nervous that I totally didn't do it. I basically said nothing, and it was really, I wasn't proud of myself for it. So fast forward, like 4.5 years ago, I became the director of the Office of Public Affairs at CIA. And, I felt like an imposter. I couldn't believe it when somebody called me and said, "Can I recommend you?" I said, "Sure." And then, lo and behold, I was honored and I got the position. And it was an amazing and really hard, but amazing 4 years there. But so that was a risk from the beginning for me to say, yep, put my name in the hat. And then when I got it, I felt like an imposter, but I also knew, like, intellectually that I was the right fit because I had the journalism background, I had the intel background, it all worked. So we took risks. We launched the first podcast for CIA. I mean, CIA podcast? But we took very seriously the, really like commander's intent, right? Which was to inform the public, protect what we needed to, but provide information and inform the public, because that's who we all work for. So I had an amazing team. We developed the Langley Files. One of the hosts might be in this room. And if you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend it because there are a lot of stories that you wouldn't have known otherwise. And that also took a lot of trust and a willingness to take risks on the part of my boss. So I think in the end was much better for the agency that we had this opportunity to really, it was a pretty open era, and it was, and I'm really proud of it. And that was about risk. And then, I'll give you one other example of risk, and that was in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there was an opportunity to try and take advantage of all the sort of the brain drain and the people who were disaffected Russians. So how do you do that? And we worked very closely with the Russia analysts and operators at CIA, and they thought there's an opportunity here to use a public channel to help recruit, to put a video out and tell people that we were open for business, which is a very unusual way for public affairs to be used, at least at CIA. And we did it. It was successful, and I was proud of the public affairs piece of it, because besides bringing the, sort of the knowing how to put something out, we also brought make sure the message is consistent with the rest of U.S. government policy. We're not calling for regime change. Make sure it doesn't sound like it, all those sorts of things. So that's just another example of taking risk and where it was effective. And frankly, I wish 25 years ago I had listened to my colleague who was willing to take a risk for me and recommend me to do something a lot harder and get me out of my comfort zone. But whatever risks I didn't take, whatever opportunities I lost, I gained others by taking risks down the road. So take risks, but just take smart risks. That's it.